If you're interested in what I look like in real life, then make sure you check out my Instagram at Joe the Insomniak. I've worked for a company who does contract work exclusively for the US Forest Service in surveying areas for invasive plants, and we basically travel all over the forest in SoCal, even in areas that are off limits to the public. I have many stories to share that fell into the category of being creepy. I have my story to tell. So my crew at work is basically between 5 and 6 people every day. The same people for 10 hours a day, 4 days a week. Like I said, we sweep through the forest by combining a search team looking for invasive plants and putting down a GPS tracker on their location to be removed. I remember one day when I started, we came across this abandoned day use area where there had obviously been some sketchy stuff going on. Now we used to park the car in a turnout across from it and eat lunch, and several cars would drive into the area over the curb. Because the main driveway was blocked with a big metal gate, people got out of their cars, some walking their dogs, some taking pictures, some for picnics, and some people just carried stuff and disappeared into the area. For a while, we had kind of skipped over the area because, according to my boss, no invasive plants have ever been tracked in the day use area, so we didn't go there. Nevertheless, it was still sketchy as hell. We would constantly drive by it and see people dumping things. What ended up happening was the crew got called to another part of the forest for a while, and we were probably out of that area for a few months, only coming back sporadically. But we drove down that same road every day and still saw cars parked there and stuff being dumped. So one day, my boss tells me that we need to walk the almost 7-mile stretch of road that day. He asks for volunteers to cover the sides of the road, which cuts through a narrow canyon, only 500 feet wide. The day use area was on the right side of the road, so I volunteered to go right with my other 2 workers, with plans on checking the area out extensively. We took our tools with us, which consisted of hoes, some folding saws, and pulaskis, which are basically a 2-headed axe with a pick on the end. Additionally, I was wearing my knife on my belt. So we started walking into the day use area, and I'm scanning for all signs of life. There's a bunch of abandoned stuff laying everywhere, like refrigerators, storage shelves, and broken glass everywhere. There's also several holes in the ground that were perfect squares, cut into the concrete, and they gone down pretty far. They weren't that big though, probably 4x4. So we kept walking back, and I see these rags scattered on the ground. Some have red stains on them. They're next to a big pile of dirt that's covered with stones and half a skateboard sticking out of the ground. There's a wooden cross nearby, and I'm thinking, is this some kind of grave? So I call the other guys over, and we read the writing on the skateboard, and it was a burial site for something that was once called a diamond. I couldn't make out the years on it, but the grave's big. One of my co-workers thought it was an animal grave. I chalk it up to being something that a dog owner's left there. We kept pushing through, and I'm seeing tons of invasive plants everywhere. I'm reading off the names to co-workers who's putting them into a GPS unit when we see a building tucked into the corner of the day use area. So we walk back there, and there's a tiny opening between the rocks, barely noticeable from the road, and it turns out to be a whole nother canyon branched off. We check the map and make sure there is a canyon near here where invasive plants could be coming from. The GPS shows nothing. We have to check it now. It's about the size of half a shipping container, clearly abandoned. The door is slightly opened. I reached out with the hoe and pried it open. It's pitch black. My co-worker takes out his phone, and there's some really weird stuff in there. There was tons of weird magazines on the floor, pillows and blankets, as well as children's clothing. I back up and start walking back to the main road. There's clothes everywhere belonging to adults. This is scaring the life out of me. I'm not about to go in there. When I get back in view of the road, there's a truck in the day-use area that's not none of ours. I don't see anyone using the picnic areas, and the weird thing is, the truck had driven over the curb to bypass the gate, and was parked in a secluded area. It didn't look like anyone was in the truck or around it, and I stay in the clearing waiting for my co-workers. When we finally got to the spot, I point out the truck to them, and they said he's probably hanging out in the old bathroom building which is off to the side of the road. They wanted to go in and check it out. I sure as hell don't want to leave them and be alone, so I follow. The building was kind of V-shaped, with male and female bathrooms on the end and a storage in the middle. They go into the men's room, whose door had literally been kicked down by someone, and apparently there was tons of illegal magazines all over the floor, tons of weird pictures of things that I'm not even going to say, with pillows and blankets. There was a small hole that had been cut into the wall leading into the small storage room. It sounded like they were literally going to try and crawl into the room for the bathroom to check it out. At this point, I was standing outside the building on the other end of the door to the storage room, and I'm not kidding you, I hear the doorknob jiggle. At that moment, my co-workers came running out of the bathroom, and one of them grabs his knife and brings it up. He quickly grabs another tool and bashes the door handle and the area around the door to the storage room. 15 seconds later, we see a man sprint out of the bathroom and run back further into the woods. Apparently, this is what happened. One of my co-workers stuck his head through the cut hole in the men's bathroom. It's pitch black. He uses his phone and sees there's a man there alone in the corner, boxes lined up with pillows and blankets on the floor. It startled him so much that he ran out too, as well as the other guy. We radioed up some of the hotshot firefighters who had a station nearby for support, and they sent a few guys and literally took a chainsaw to the door, set up a floodlight, and the room is filled with boxes and photos of really bad stuff. We told them where the man ran off to into the other building, so they went to check it out as well. Opened the door, floodlights on, and the creepiest thing out of the whole experience was that the building actually went back further into the dirt at the adjacent hills. The firefighters checked their photography maps, and sure enough, there was a bunker, and nobody went further into that place. Now, I've been homeless a lot, and I've lived in some distant families' land where they have an old cabin upon slits. Due to the local woods flooding heavily sometimes, I spend a good amount of time in this old cabin. There's a wood stove and a swing hanging from the porch. I use that as a bed sometimes. Overall, it was an okay place, and it wasn't too far of a drive from town to get food. You just have to tolerate the half-mile walk to your car. So anyway, one day I'm out walking around the woods, and in a smallish clearing in the path, I see easily a good 50 to 60 dead geese. Every one of them is mangled in horrifying ways. Necks ripped off their bodies, blood everywhere, feathers for the life of me, bones sticking out of the dirt. It looks like a genocide. The ground is dry and there's lots of dust, but I saw no prints and there was no other evidence of anything ever being there, aside from what I can only assume was some sort of explosion. I also found a torn open old backpack with a great deal of candy wrappers thrown about. Way too mouldy to identify or know anything of. I decide to turn back to see if I can grab a camera when I start hearing this god-awful shrieking sound, as if it was coming from every possible place. I took off pretty fast when it started, and to this day, my best guess is that it's a massive fume of toxins, or maybe it was from some massive animal. I really can't get a rational explanation here, and it really scares me. A mate of mine and his cousin decided to go on a motorbike trip around Australia. Unfortunately, on the second day, the cousin's wallet falls out of his back pocket, and it was only hundreds of kilometers later that he realizes. Now, the two of them were forced to rely on only one guy's money, since all of the bank branches refused to give out money to my cousin with no ID, which of course is in his wallet. Matters were complicated later when they filled up with non-sniffable Opal petrol, which buggered up their engines and required them to pay a mechanic to fix it. The end result was that they had almost no money, and any money left had to be rationed for petrol. They're eating 2-minute noodles for every meal and sleeping rough. In some towns in the middle of nowhere, they would go to the local pub just for warmth and company, but couldn't afford a beer. So one night they stopped at a town that consisted of a handful of houses, a caravan park and a hotel. When they went into the hotel, they met all of the locals, including the local cop and the owner of the caravan park. Mr. Caravan Park started talking with them and was getting pretty chummy because he knew that his was the only place offering accommodation and camping in that area that was legal due to the presence of crocs. Realizing that if they planned on camping illegally, they could get tipped off to the police, they decided to sneak out without anyone realizing and head out of town. They were hoping to find some shelter, but it was featureless red dirt as far as the eye can see. After about 20 minutes, they came to a bridge and hid their bikes under it to set up camp, even though they're in the middle of nowhere. Roads, trains would come by on a regular basis, and were loud enough even from a distance. The next morning, they went back to the pub to get water and noticed some old photos on the wall. One of them featured a very large crocodile. In the background was a bridge that they were sleeping under. I was on summer break and went camping with my friend and his parents. We went to the lake during the day and did the s'mores thing at night. His parents shared a tent while my friend and I had our own. I can't remember where our campsite was, and I'm not really in contact with my friend anymore. But 15 years later, I'm assuming it wasn't the safest place to go camping. Here's why. I woke up sometime in the early morning at like 3 or 4 AM and immediately saw a man's face looking in through the tent that he had unzipped at the door, sticking his head through with this absolutely insane look on his eyes. With wild hair, I'm literally stiff with fear I can't do anything but look at the man, who's very slowly moving his head from left to right, as if this isn't bad enough. I guess my friend could hear my breathing loudly or something, because he woke up too, having the same reaction as me, just laying there looking in terror at this mysterious man. And I'm not certain for how long he was actually sitting there, but it felt like it was hours, moving his head back and forth. At some point, we heard a noise close by. Oh God, there's more, I think to myself, literally shaking. But apparently, it's not with the man. He quickly disappears a couple of minutes later. We got out of our tent and woke up his parents, but the guy was long gone. What's more crazy about this is the guy didn't even blink. He literally just shook his head from left to right, staring at us, shaking. I've never seen anything so terrifying in my life, and I really don't want to again. This happened about 15 years ago. I was 6 and my sister was 11. We were camping with our grandparents on a campground we went to often, in a tent trailer we always used. We had been there for a few nights, having no problems at all. If you're not familiar with a tent trailer, the kind my family owns has 2 queen-size beds that fold outwards off the trailer, and we're somewhat suspended. We have a tarp over our head attached with hooks underneath to the base. Now in the middle of the night when we're all asleep, a man come into our campground and unhooked some of the tarp under my bed. He reaches his hand in and starts feeling around. I woke up to the feeling of someone touching my hair. Assuming it's my sister, I don't react for a few seconds. She suddenly jerks up, and we both realise there's a hand wrapped around her arm, and that a man's whispering, "Shh." Hysterically, we both start screaming for our lives. My sister and I start bending his fingers backwards, hoping to make him stop. My grandpa then wakes up for our screaming and figures out what's happening, and my grandfather furiously ran outside, but no one's there. The man's gone. Now thank God this was our last night there, and we were leaving in the morning. Needless to say, we would have left anyway. I'm just so glad that my granddad actually woke up and was able to help us. If it was just us there alone, I would have hated to think of what could have happened. Me and my father always went fishing. Heck, it's something we still do now. We live in the backwoods community, so nature's always around us. I've later moved into the city life, but whenever I'm staying with my mum and dad, I always like to go doing hunting or fishing with my father. Now from being out in the wilderness for so long, you truly get used to what's around you. My dad, being so seasoned, always had an explanation for something weird that would happen. However, there was one time something happened that was so weird that neither of us could explain it, even to this day. So I was 18 at the time. We were doing some night fishing in a lake, something that I absolutely loved to do. We're having a great time, just talking about life and things in general. I was actually planning to move to the city around that time, so we spent a long time talking about that. And my dad was saying that maybe when I'm older I should come back to the forest and get back to nature, but he understood the opportunities that moving out into the city offered me, and I was really excited. Now as we're saying this, the moon seems to be shining really bright. It was cloud covered at first, so we didn't really see it. As we're sitting there talking, something seems off. We both stop talking at the same time, and I see almost a blue glow on my dad's face. I reach down to see if I have a torch on, and then I notice it. all of the water around us has a very light blue ambient glow. And I'm not kidding you, the entire lake seemed to have this glow to it. Everything around us was silent. I look at my dad, and he's just as scared as I am. We don't say a word, and suddenly, we hear an explosion sound in the sky. I'm terrified. We both jump to the deck, and stay cowering for what feels like an eternity. It's probably only about 10 seconds though. We both slowly raise our heads, and the light's gone, and there's no clouds in the sky. We quickly pull the boat into the harbour, and get going home as quick as we possibly can. And to this day, I have no idea what the hell happened. I don't believe in the supernatural or UFOs, but I really think this has to have been something from out of this world. The closest thing I can think is that something carrying some kind of voltage dropped from the sky into the water, explaining the explosion sound, but it doesn't add up. My dad thinks it might have been something extraterrestrial, but I don't know. All I know is it scared the life out of me, and I've never seen anything like it.